8:37, Big 550, KTRA. Colorado Man is where our next guest spent last week doing some investigative work on capitalism on the front lines. Good morning, David Stokes.
Good morning, McGraw. Good morning, Kelly.
Good morning.
You're going to be disappointed in my investigative report here, I think, McGraw.
You told your bosses at the Show Me Institute that you were going skiing. What was it like? Tell us about the trip.
Well, the trip was fantastic.
Yes.
The weather was great. I was, 12,000 feet up in the mountains, came back here
you were high, all right.
to get cold. And, I'll say this. It's like watching the local news in Colorado now. They basically talk now about two things, and that's legalized pot and the weather.
Really?
That's all they seem to talk about in the local. It's big business there now.
Did you see where were you? We are from Breckenridge. Where were you in the mountains?
I was spent a night in Denver and then went up to Breckenridge for the week.
Okay. You know what? You should go. Did you go to downstairs at Eric's?
I did.
Yeah. You should have told him you're on the show. He's a friend of ours.
I didn't know that.
Yeah. He's also the mayor of Breckenridge now too, I think.
We were there. We showed up to get some pizza. We're told that there was an hour and a half wait for a table.
You should have dropped my name.
Really should have done.
You should have dropped every time you go to Breckenridge and you go downstairs at Eric's Pizza Place, mention you listen to the show, he will bump you right to the front line.
Wow. We ended up taking takeout and just having our kids play video games. They have that huge arcade there.
Yeah, I spent some time playing video games there as well. All right, so did you see any marijuana dispensaries?
I did not.
So,
I think they're still almost entirely in Denver.
Okay.
And we just got into Denver late at night, stayed at my brother's house, and left the next morning. So outside of Denver, there's very few, but it is expanding.
Did you see anybody smoking on the street corner or anything that was? Is it different in any way?
Or did you smell anything?
Yeah.
I didn't smell anything. I didn't see anything. One of the reasons for it is, that it's still illegal under federal law, and they're not enforcing it in most of Colorado. But
right.
The ski resorts tend to be in federal national forests, where they're I think they long-term leases of the property.
Right.
So federal law really still does apply in the ski reports, as it is technically, a lot of them, I understand, still federal property.
Right, and there is a law that says you can't smoke it in public.
Right.
Yeah, so you have to smoke it in the privacy of your own home or whatever.
I understand, and this is just from hearing people joke about that the chairlifts are very popular places. Very popular places now to get something out of your pocket real quickly, eat it, and it's mostly the edibles. Eat it and then put it back in before you get off the chairlift.
I only spent one official season in Breckenridge, and I'll tell you that the chairlifts were popular back then, as well as now that it's legal. So that's where you do all the dirty stuff.
Right.
Yeah. Okay. But the conversation is all about medical or marijuana in general. It's talk to people in the street. It's all
a lot of it. The news covers it. All sorts of different aspects of it. The financial aspect. Banks, credit cards can use transactions. Is it still going to be all cash? And I understand there's some news on that where the federal government now might not enforce those laws as strictly because they realize it's probably not a good thing to force businesses to sit around with millions of dollars of cash. It's
yeah. Having your financial system off the grid is not a good thing for any government.
Right.
What are your thoughts as a free market economist as you watch the front lines of capitalism and people voting their rights? What are your thoughts as you watch all this?
Well, I'm just talking for myself here.
Certainly understandable, yeah.
Just talking for...
You're not talking for Rex here.
We're just talking for nothing to do with the Show Me Institute.
Okay.
Or just talking for David Stokes, average guy. I think I think other states should follow Colorado's lead.
Right.
I think it is free market capitalism, and people want to do, and the things in the privacy of their own home, they should be allowed to. That's my thoughts.
Ladies and gentlemen.
And I think they will. I mean, Washington is going down this step in just a couple of months. They just decided they'd do it a little bit later than Colorado
I think California's putting it on their ballot. There's a couple other states that are starting to put it on their ballots as well. So it's just a matter of time before more states follow suit. So yeah.
I would guess in a couple of years you'll have a lot of states doing this. Now you won't get the people traveling to Colorado for it once a number of states have passed it, so the effect will be smaller.
Right. All right, let's get to closer to home. There's a story in our hometown newspaper about the Central Corridor booming in St. Louis. The Cortex building, the Central West End, Clayton, all that 40 corridor, that 6440 corridor, shows that things are working in the city and in the region.
Well, it certainly shows, and I believe it was a Sunday article in the Post-Dispatch, really good article, and it certainly shows that that area is booming.
Yes.
And I've lived in St. Louis my whole life, and I've lived in the Central Corridor my whole life. I did some math in my head as I'm reading this article, and I've probably lived a dozen places in St. Louis, and every one of them's in that area.
Right.
And it's great to see, but it's strange to read the article and not have one mention of all the subsidies that take place for this growth. Even as an aside, I mean, if you've taken an enormous amount of money from people elsewhere in the St. Louis region and throughout the state of Missouri and put it in the Central Corridor, even though much of it has always been the most successful part of St. Louis.
Right.
So it's the part that doesn't really need the subsidies, yet they're getting immense subsidies, so not surprisingly, it's doing pretty well.
It's not just, federal subsidies as well. Washington Avenue, I think, had a lot of federal subsidies to it as well, and that was mentioned in that article as being part of that Central Corridor.
Well, the historic tax credits and the state tax credits, on Washington Avenue, a colleague of mine, Patrick Ishmael, at Show Me Institute, did a map a few years back that just showed how the tax credits, the historic tax credits in Missouri have just been dominated by the general Washington Avenue area, more so than almost any other one area. So when you do this, when you invest that much of other people's money in an area, yeah, you're going to have success.
Right.
But the thought comes, what would have happened if you hadn't taken other people's money and targeted towards the Central Corridor? Now, as a resident of the Central Corridor, I benefit from this, but it's not as cut and dried as the area's doing great. Let's keep doing what we're doing, because one of the points that I want people, if you read the article, to take is it's hard to stop. Once you've made an area successful, even though I think we all realize most of it was long. Clayton's always been Clayton.
Right.
The West End's mostly been a pretty great area. It's not like you stop. You still have IKEA has a huge TIF. Richmond Heights, this incredibly successful city, just gave a big TIF to a Menards.
Right.
You're still subsidizing everything because it gets into your bone marrow, and it's what you do.
It's really interesting, and on the crux of that, today they're making the big announcement that Laclede Gas is moving from the Laclede Gas building to the Gen America building, which is 3 blocks away, to the tune of $7 million in TIF financing.
It's a great example and appropriate with the article. Right here in downtown St. Louis, a successful area, and all along this corridor, it's a great book. There's a book called Mapping Decline that was published a couple of years ago by a gentleman named Colin Gordon, a scholar out of Iowa. And he looked at the history of St. Louis, and the point of the book is the colossal failure of economic development planning in the city of St. Louis. And one of his key points is all these programs start out as under the guise of helping lower income areas, but they're all inevitably finagled so that they may be supposed to help the lower income areas, but they're all actually designed to help the successful areas be even more successful. And I think this article is a good example of the effects that you see in the book Mapping Decline, that we're supposed to take these subsidies to help, North St. Louis grow, but none of it actually goes, or very little of it, other than the enormous Paul McKee subsidy I think you could defend it with. It's targeted towards the Central West End and Richmond Heights and Brentwood and these successful areas that get the huge TIFs, get the huge subsidies, and then we're supposed to celebrate when they're successful.
It's a really interesting debate, because you think of that Gen America building there right next to Ballpark Village, right next to a stadium that draws 3 million people year in and year out. You're going to tell me that building has sat vacant for 10, 12, 15 years because no company wants in, and that's probably the most valuable building in downtown St. Louis.
It's a strange scenario, and I would say if the building, because it's configured as such, if it's not able to suit the modern demands, and I don't think that justifies a $7 million TIF plus millions more in historic federal and state tax credits. I think if it doesn't work for the modern market, then tear it down and put something else there.
Well, at least steal something from Clayton. Don't steal something from yourself. You're stealing from, you're taking a Laclede gas company that's a highly regulated utility, so they're selling gas heat to people who need it. So it's a well-run machine. They don't need any subsidies. Laclede Gas is doing just fine on their own, and they're taking it and moving it 2.5, 3 blocks. It doesn't make any sense.
And the city's going to see a decline in both property tax revenue and earnings tax revenue because of the TIF. I mean, the building the cleat is in will take a hit, and the earnings tax is paid by, and I'm no fan of the earnings tax, but the fact is, I mean, that's going to be cut in half by the fact that they're moving to a building, what those employees are paying.
And just, it's great news just as long as you don't own the Laclede gas building.
I was going to say, is anyone even moving in the current Laclede gas building?
Well, they're losing by far their biggest tenant. I mean, they have other tenants. It's not like the building will close, but it's going to absolutely put a huge hit in their bottom line. And since property taxes are going to be paid based in part on that, that building's going to pay lesser property taxes to the city going forward.
When can we read you? When can we see you?
You can just see so much from testimonies and op-eds and other opinions on TIF and other subsidies at showmeinstitute.org. Follow me on Twitter at David C. Stokes.
Did you bring back any paraphernalia from Colorado? Any refrigerator magnets?
In one of the slalom courses where you can pay to do a slalom race down one of the mountains. Yes. I did win a bronze medal for there, so I have a bronze medal, which proves really nothing more than I am capable of completing a slalom medal race and actually making it around all the poles.
But
at a vaguely high rate of speed.
No refrigerator magnets, no roach clips, no nothing, huh? No large tubes filled with water or anything.
No, this was a sort of a family-oriented vacation. For better or worse, this was a family-oriented vacation.
David Stokes here on the Big 550 KTRS.
This Friday